Intelligence operations don't stop at borders. And they certainly don't stop just because two countries are supposed to be on the same side. In November 2023, Turkish authorities announced the arrest of over 50 individuals accused of conducting espionage operations for Israeli intelligence inside Turkey. These weren't arrests in Tehran or Beirut, cities where you'd expect Israeli intelligence to operate. These arrests happened in Istanbul, Ankara, and Izmir. Inside a NATO member state. Inside a country that maintains diplomatic relations with Israel. Inside a nation that, on paper, should be cooperating with Israeli security interests through the Atlantic Alliance. The arrests raised an immediate question that many people didn't think to ask. Why would Israel spy on Turkey? And perhaps more importantly, what does it tell us that Turkey chose to announce these arrests so publicly? To understand why Israeli intelligence would conduct operations inside Turkey, you first need to understand Turkey's unique strategic position in global geopolitics. Turkey isn't just another Middle Eastern country. It's a NATO member since 1952, giving it formal military alliance with the United States and most of Europe. It controls the Bosphorus and Dardanelles Straits, which means it controls Russian naval access from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. It borders Syria, Iraq, and Iran, putting it adjacent to some of the most volatile conflict zones in the world. And it sits at the intersection of Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, making it a natural crossroads for trade, migration, and intelligence operations. Turkey's relationship with Israel has been complicated for decades. During the Cold War and through the 1990s, Turkey and Israel maintained relatively warm relations. They conducted military exercises together. They shared intelligence on regional threats. Turkish and Israeli defense industries collaborated on weapons systems. This cooperation was driven by shared concerns about Syria, Iraq, and Iran, plus Turkey's desire to balance its relationships in a complex region. But this relationship deteriorated significantly after 2010, particularly following the Mavi Marmara incident when Israeli naval forces boarded a Turkish ship attempting to break the Gaza blockade, killing 10 Turkish citizens. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's government adopted increasingly pro-Palestinian rhetoric and distanced itself from Israel. Diplomatic relations were downgraded. Military cooperation ceased. Intelligence sharing became minimal. However, even during this tension, Turkey and Israel never completely severed ties. They maintained low-level diplomatic relations. Trade continued. And importantly for intelligence purposes, Turkey remained a geographic necessity for Israeli operations. Because regardless of political tensions, Turkey's location makes it strategically critical for anyone conducting intelligence operations in the Middle East. Turkey hosts significant diaspora communities from across the region: Iranians, Syrians, Iraqis, Lebanese. These communities include political exiles, business networks, and individuals with connections back to their home countries. For any intelligence service trying to monitor developments in Iran, Syria, or Iraq, Turkey represents a target-rich environment where you can access information that would be nearly impossible to obtain inside those countries directly. Turkey also serves as a logistics hub. Weapons, money, technology, and people move through Turkey to destinations throughout the Middle East. Monitoring these flows provides intelligence on arms trafficking, terrorism financing, and proxy force support networks. For Israel, which views Iranian weapons shipments to Hezbollah and Hamas as existential threats, understanding what moves through Turkey is operationally critical. Additionally, Turkey itself has become a more complicated actor under Erdogan's government. Turkey maintains relationships with Hamas leadership, who operate political offices in Istanbul. Turkey has complex dealings with Iran despite being on opposite sides of some regional conflicts. And Turkey's military operations in Syria sometimes put it at odds with Israeli interests. From an Israeli intelligence perspective, understanding Turkish decision-making, Turkish relationships with hostile actors, and Turkish tolerance for activities that threaten Israeli security are all legitimate intelligence requirements. So when Turkish authorities announced in November 2023 that they had arrested over 50 people for allegedly spying for Mossad, the operational logic wasn't difficult to understand. The question was what specifically these networks were doing and why Turkey chose to announce the arrests so publicly. According to Turkish media reports, which should be understood as government-approved messaging, the arrests were the result of a counterintelligence operation that had been ongoing for months. Turkish authorities claimed the detained individuals were Turkish citizens who had been recruited by Mossad to conduct surveillance, gather information, and potentially conduct operations inside Turkey. The alleged activities reportedly included photographing Iranian and Syrian nationals living in Turkey, tracking their movements, and reporting their locations and activities to Israeli intelligence handlers. Turkish authorities also claimed that some individuals were tasked with identifying potential targets for assassination or kidnapping. This is significant because it suggests not just passive intelligence collection but preparation for direct action operations on Turkish soil. If true, this would represent a serious violation of Turkish sovereignty and a major escalation beyond what intelligence agencies typically do even in countries where they operate covertly. The profile of those arrested is also notable. According to Turkish reporting, many were not professional intelligence operatives but rather Turkish citizens recruited for specific tasks, taking photographs, following individuals, renting vehicles or properties for surveillance. This is consistent with how intelligence agencies typically operate in foreign countries. You don't send your own officers to conduct street-level surveillance. You recruit local assets who blend in naturally and can operate without attracting attention. Turkish authorities specifically highlighted that the targets of this surveillance were primarily Iranian nationals living in Turkey. This makes strategic sense from an Israeli intelligence perspective. Iran is Israel's primary regional adversary. Iranian intelligence operates networks throughout the Middle East supporting proxy forces and conducting operations against Israeli interests. Monitoring Iranian operatives, businessmen, and officials when they're outside Iran and therefore more vulnerable to surveillance is standard intelligence practice. Turkey hosts thousands of Iranians. Some are political dissidents who fled the regime. Others are businessmen conducting trade that may be subject to sanctions. And some may be Iranian intelligence officers using Turkey as a base for regional operations. For Mossad, having visibility into who these people are, who they meet with, and what they're doing provides critical intelligence about Iranian activities. However, we need to distinguish what Turkish authorities claim from what we can independently verify. The arrests were real, individuals were detained, and Turkish courts processed cases. But the specific operational details, what these individuals actually did, whether they were genuinely working for Mossad, and what their actual targets were, come from Turkish government sources. In counterintelligence cases, governments often shape public narratives for political purposes. Arrests might be legitimate counterintelligence successes, or they might be politically motivated prosecutions where the espionage charges are exaggerated or fabricated. What we can assess analytically is that it would be entirely consistent with Israeli intelligence requirements and operational patterns to conduct surveillance of Iranian nationals in Turkey. We can also assess that Turkey has capable counterintelligence services that could plausibly detect such operations. And we can assess that the decision to announce these arrests publicly, rather than handling them quietly, was almost certainly a political choice designed to send messages both domestically and internationally. To understand how these operations work and how they get detected, we need to examine the tradecraft involved. When intelligence agencies operate in foreign countries, especially countries that aren't actively hostile but also aren't fully cooperative, they face specific operational challenges. They can't operate as openly as they might in friendly liaison relationships, but they also can't use the same aggressive tactics they might use in enemy territory. The typical approach is recruiting local assets rather than deploying agency officers to conduct operations directly. A Mossad case officer based in Israel or a third country would recruit Turkish citizens who have access or can develop access to information Israel wants. These assets might be recruited for ideological reasons, Turkish citizens who are sympathetic to Israel or hostile to Iran. They might be recruited for financial reasons, people who need money and are willing to take risks for payment. Or they might be recruited through compromise, people who can be coerced through blackmail or legal threats. Once recruited, these assets receive specific assignments. In a surveillance operation targeting Iranian nationals in Turkey, the tasks might include photographing specific individuals, noting when they arrive at and leave certain locations, documenting who they meet with, recording vehicle license plates, and reporting patterns of activity. The asset typically doesn't know the broader intelligence picture. They're told to photograph a specific person or watch a specific building, but they don't necessarily know why or how their reporting connects to larger operations. Communication between assets and handlers is always the most vulnerable point in these operations. The asset needs to transmit the information they've collected without being detected. This might involve encrypted messaging applications, physical dead drops where information is left at agreed locations, or brief personal meetings in locations where surveillance is difficult. But every communication creates risk. Turkish counterintelligence monitors electronic communications for suspicious patterns. They watch for encryption tools used by foreign intelligence services. And they deploy physical surveillance teams to monitor individuals suspected of espionage. Financial transactions represent another vulnerability. Assets need to be paid, and moving money from Israeli intelligence to Turkish citizens creates a traceable pattern. Large unexplained cash deposits, foreign currency transactions, or payments through suspicious channels all trigger financial intelligence monitoring. Turkish authorities, like most governments, track banking activity for signs of criminal or espionage-related transactions. The human factor is often where operations fail. Assets get careless. They tell family members or friends what they're doing. They take risks that attract attention. Or they get caught in unrelated law enforcement actions, traffic stops, routine investigations, that inadvertently expose their intelligence activities. Once one asset is identified, interrogation and investigation can unravel entire networks as authorities identify everyone the compromised individual contacted. Turkish counterintelligence services are professionally capable organizations. Turkey's National Intelligence Organization, known as MIT, has decades of experience conducting counterintelligence operations. They've dealt with Soviet intelligence during the Cold War, Kurdish militant organizations using Turkey as operational territory, and more recently, intelligence services from multiple Middle Eastern countries operating inside Turkey's borders. They understand how foreign intelligence agencies work, and they have the technical and human resources to detect operations if they're looking. But detection alone doesn't mean immediate arrests. Counterintelligence often involves watching suspected networks for extended periods to map their complete structure before making arrests. This is called playing the fish, letting the operation continue under observation to identify all participants, understand the full scope of activities, and potentially feed misleading information back to the Foreign Intelligence Service. The timing of when to make arrests is a strategic decision. Do you move immediately to disrupt the operation? Or do you wait to gather more intelligence about the Foreign Service's methods, targets, and personnel? The decision by Turkish authorities to announce these arrests so publicly suggests multiple strategic calculations were at play. First, public arrests send a deterrent message. They warn Israeli intelligence that Turkey is aware of their operations and actively countering them. They also warn Turkish citizens that cooperating with foreign intelligence carries serious legal consequences. Turkey's judicial system treats espionage as a severe crime with substantial prison sentences, so publicizing arrests reinforces that deterrent. Second, public announcements serve domestic political purposes. For President Erdogan's government, which has positioned itself as a defender of Palestinian rights and a critic of Israeli policy, announcing the disruption of Israeli spy networks reinforces that political narrative. It demonstrates to domestic audiences that the government is protecting Turkish sovereignty against foreign intelligence services, particularly from a country that Erdogan frequently criticizes. Third, these announcements send international diplomatic signals. By publicly revealing Israeli intelligence operations in Turkey, the Turkish government creates diplomatic pressure. It forces Israel to either acknowledge the operations, deny them and appear deceptive, or remain silent and appear guilty. It also signals to other countries, particularly Iran, that Turkey is taking action against Israeli intelligence activities on Turkish soil, which can serve Turkey's broader regional diplomatic interests. Fourth, public arrests can be used as leverage in bilateral negotiations. Intelligence incidents create opportunities for diplomatic horse trading. Turkey might use these arrests to pressure Israel on other issues, perhaps seeking concessions on Gaza policy, negotiations about energy resources in the Eastern Mediterranean, or other bilateral disputes. Intelligence incidents become currency in the broader relationship. The strategic consequences of these arrests extend beyond Turkey and Israel. They reveal something important about how intelligence operations work even between countries that maintain diplomatic relations and share alliance memberships through NATO. The reality is that allied nations spy on each other routinely. France spies on the United States. The United States spies on Germany. Israel spies on Turkey. This isn't exceptional, it's normal statecraft. Countries have intelligence requirements about allies' decision-making, their relationships with third parties, and their activities that might affect your interests, even when you're formally aligned. NATO membership doesn't eliminate intelligence competition. It creates a framework for military cooperation and collective defense. But it doesn't mean members share all intelligence or stop monitoring each other. Turkey and Israel are both connected to NATO, Israel through partnership programs, Turkey as a full member, but they have divergent interests on numerous regional issues. Those divergent interests create legitimate intelligence requirements that each country will try to satisfy, regardless of formal alliance structures. For Turkey, these arrests demonstrate that maintaining relationships with actors Israel views as hostile, Hamas leadership in Istanbul, complex dealings with Iran, creates situations where Israel will conduct intelligence operations to monitor those relationships. For Israel, these arrests demonstrate that conducting operations in Turkey carries significant counterintelligence risk and potential diplomatic costs. The risk-benefit calculation of operating in Turkey becomes more complex when networks get rolled up and publicly exposed. The broader lesson here is that modern espionage exists in a gray zone where countries simultaneously cooperate and compete. Turkey and Israel maintain diplomatic relations despite political tensions. They share some intelligence through NATO frameworks and occasional bilateral cooperation. But they also run intelligence operations against each other's interests, when those interests diverge. This is the messy reality of international relations where cooperation and competition coexist, and intelligence services operate in the spaces between formal alliances and adversarial relationships. The Mossad spy hunt in Turkey isn't an aberration. It's a window into how intelligence operations work in complex geopolitical environments where relationships are either fully friendly nor completely hostile. It demonstrates that counterintelligence remains a critical function even in relatively open societies where foreign intelligence services can operate with some degree of access. And it shows how intelligence incidents become entangled with broader diplomatic, political, and strategic dynamics. If you found this analysis valuable, like this video for more intelligence breakdowns. Subscribe to WarRoom Intel for weekly analysis of CIA, Mossad, and global espionage operations.